the labor shortage. You certainly could not have picked up your financial newspaper or turned on to your favorite business channel without hearing about it. It's everywhere, including in a publication put out by the Federal Reserve this week on September 8th. They released the Beige Book. Now, this is not, and this has to be distinguished from the off-white, the ivory, and eggshell books, which are totally different. This is the Beige Book. And Jeff, it's a collection of anecdotes. Jeff Snider, the head of global research for Alhambra Partners, it's a collection of anecdotes that was implemented in the very early 1970s by Arthur Burns. And we're going to talk about what we found in there. You talk about it in your blog post at Alhambra Investments, posted on the 8th of September, the day the Beige Book was released, turning the labor shortage up to 11. And Jeff, I'm going to read about what was happening in Boston from a Beige Book here. Tight labor markets are seen for at least some positions in each of retail, manufacturing, software, IT services, and a severe labor shortage is said to be restraining hiring and expansion in the Massachusetts restaurant industry. It wasn't just the New England Patriots' hometown area. No. Let me read something from Texas, again, from a Beige Book. A shortage of low-wage workers has led to scattered wage pressures in a few industries. One contact attributed the labor shortage to a recent influx of telemarketing firms. Highly skilled construction workers continue to be in short supply, leading to wage pressures. Jeff, you set me up. I've set the audience up. As I was going through this, I was making notes and I was saying, yeah, there's always a labor shortage of highly skilled construction workers. There should be a shortage of engineers, production workers, computer programmers, and computer scientists. So I was like thinking, this is normal. That was on page 1. What happens on page 2?
Well, don't forget, I think that from the one Boston Beige Book, the person they quoted said it was the worst they had seen in 35 years of the restaurant industry in Boston, which sounds like this must have been ripped from the headlines of the Wall Street Journal just today or yesterday or the day before, right? Because all we've heard, as we talked about in the previous segment, that the labor market must be tight even though Americans are not rejoining the labor force. They're not rejoining the labor force because they're lazy, they like $300 extra in unemployment benefits, blah, 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 whatever it is. And so it sounds like, this is today. This is restaurateurs are complaining bitterly about the inability to find labor and source labor, and it's holding them back. The economy would be so much better if you stupid Americans would get off the couch and actually go back to work. Except no. The Beige Book, the one about the quotes about Boston in the first district were actually taken from the Beige Book from, what was it, July
2016.
July of 2016. So they were complaining about a labor shortage in 2016, which, as we just talked about, which was kind of consistent with what the labor force dynamics actually were at that time, which were Americans saying, maybe you have a job, but it doesn't pay anywhere near what I need it to pay for me to come work for you. And then the other one from Texas, that was actually October of 1996.
Yes.
And the point being is that, look, anytime, anywhere, any kind of economy, you're going to be able to find a quote-unquote labor shortage. You'll find references to it. You'll find business people who lament the ability, their inability to find workers that they want at the price they're willing to pay. Any time throughout history, you can find there are structural labor problems where, look, in one industry is declining and another industry is ascending. It takes time to train workers to take workers from the descending industry, retrain them, and have them find better days in the industry that's ascending. There's all sorts of things that combine underneath in these dynamic economies where you can find anecdotes and even some pockets of data that say, yes, labor shortage, it's happening. As you pointed out, Emil, construction firms have been complaining about skilled labor for as long as I've been an adult. I remember in the 90s they were complaining about that. So labor shortage on these micro scales isn't really hard to find, nor is it anything abnormal or atypical.
All skilled labor is in short supply. Highly specialized highly skilled, any worker that's highly skilled is in short supply at all times, I would think. But Jeff, you point out that's a function of the world we live in. Super. However, you also make the point that there's a difference in the post-2008 experience. Now the labor shortage is a slogan which merely repeats with extra emphasis through the years. It tries to transform these microscale anecdotes and genuine incidences into some massive macro phenomenon, essentially to let the status quo, such as the Fed's ineffective QE policies, off the hook. That's the difference.
That's really what it, yeah, we've taken these things, these labor shortages, these micro-scale labor shortages that happen off time or always through time, and now we hype them up, we being mostly the financial media, but also, look, the Beige Book. The Beige Book, I think, it was before COVID, I used to track how many times the Beige Book would mention labor shortage. Mm-hmm. You could see it matched with Federal Reserve and mainstream rhetoric about inflation and economic growth and recovery potential, even though there was no data for it. Look, again, micro-scale labor shortages existed, and what's happened, especially if you remember 2018, it was the last time this really got out of control in the same way, was it got hyped up. These anecdotes and these individual stories and these micro-scale labor shortages were brought forward as if they were representative of the entire economic system. Look, it was, yes, we can't find restaurant workers in Boston. That must therefore represent the entire condition throughout the entire United States economy because Jay Powell says so. Right? That's really what it is. Jay Powell says inflation, the labor market's tight. He said inflation is going to rise. So it doesn't seem to be happening in markets. It doesn't seem to be happening in the real economy. So let's go looking for individual stories that at least fit that kind of a narrative. And that's gone into hyperdrive over the last, certainly in 2021, as the labor, as we just referenced in the previous segment, the labor force itself has been stagnant for over a year. And so there has to be all sorts of other excuses for why that is. And one of the excuses is that, the labor market just is tight. The labor market is the way it is because this is as good as it gets.
I remember those graphs that you used to do, and I believe it was 2018, Jeff, when you were doing them. I think it would be great to bring them back because you did them because it was happening again. We were talking about a labor shortage. Why? Because the economy seemed to be struggling, right? It shouldn't have been. It was globally synchronized growth. So we saw these anecdotal, examples being emphasized because this Beige Book is curated by the people at each of the districts to emphasize a particular point of view. And that would be a great graph to bring back just to see if, again, because I remember it was rising and falling with the economy. It was perfectly timed. Okay, so that was qualitative. Let's do quantitative now to talk about the labor shortage.
There was let's forget too, and part of this too is that a big part of especially the mainstream media stories, from the Wall Street Journal, for example. I remember, it was almost daily there would be a story in the journal, as there is, this year, about how companies would have to get creative to find workers because they were in such short supply. The perks in the break room, all sorts of food brought in and things like that.
I love it.
And they were so amusing at the time. If it wasn't so such a serious issue, they were so amusing and comical because companies don't have to get creative. If you really want workers, there's a really simple answer to all of this, which means you pay them what they want to be paid, and they will show up at your doorstep. I mean, it's like magic, right? Who would have thought if you give workers the amount of money they want to get paid to work, they will actually come into your company. So there's no need to throw out, a couple extra vacation days or perks or whatever it is. Just pay them. It's really that simple. If companies would pay the market clearing wage, given the fact that there are millions upon millions upon millions of Americans sitting on the sidelines, telling the government they're sitting on the sidelines not looking for work, give them the pay that they want and they will come off the sidelines and work for you. So what we're really talking about isn't really a labor shortage. It's a shortage of economic recovery because what's really causing this problem is the fact that companies are telling you they cannot pay the market clearing wage. And that's really the issue at work here. If companies can't pay what labor wants, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right, they can't generate the revenue off of that worker, therefore it's too much risk to hire the worker at.
Or they're not confident enough about the future to take on new labor, because look, it's bringing in new workers is a commitment. It's a hassle. It's a friction. It's all these, all these micro-scale economic problems where you have to be reasonably confident that, the work that you thought that you need these people to do is going to continue in the future. Otherwise, they can become a real harm to your balance sheet and to your income statement and to your survival. Because if you have too many workers, that's a really bad place to be if your worst fears about the economy really do materialize. So that's part of this too. You're not going to pay workers if you aren't really, really sure that the work you think we might want them to do is going to be around for as long as you want it to be. And part of the problem too is it's been so long since we've been in an actual legitimate economic boom, we forget what it looks like. And for business owners, you go back to the 1990s, for example, these kinds of things, yes, there's these anecdotes about labor shortages and skilled workers and whatnot, but when business is actually booming, the last thing you're going to be worried about is, maybe I don't want to pay my worker this extra 50 cents an hour that'll get them to come in. Or, you're not going to be over managing your cost structure. You're going to be more concerned about, do I really have enough resources, because the opportunities are so good and they're going to continue to be so good. If I need to pay a little more for my workers to get more workers in, I'm going to pay it and be happy about doing it. So it's really about the wage rate and the pay rate and the inability of companies to really be confident about what they're actually seeing in the real economy.
And again, I bring it up often. It's not like we're going through our first recession. We talk about it all the time. This is the fourth dollar shortage that's taken place across the world 4 times now. So why should they commit themselves now? No, they need to see a lot more, a new social contract, as I've been talking about before. Let's go qualitative. Let's go quantitative. Let's go quantitative and talk about what was released on the 7th of September, a Tuesday, from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Jobs Opening and Labor Survey. And in February of 2021, it was quite high already then. It was around the 2018 peak. Since February, it has gone, as you say, nuclear, suggesting labor shortage.
Labor shortage, right? Case
Huge.
Closed.
Off the
we're
charts.
Talking about labor
shortage.
Literally, it's beyond anything you could possibly. We never would have seen this before. In the amount of job openings, which is the JO part of the JOLTS survey, was up to almost 11 million in the latest month, which is just the month of July. It's one month further back from the main payroll reports. So in the month of July, the BLS says that there were nearly 11 million job openings, while the rates of hiring lag significantly, which again, most people are interpreting this data as case closed, labor shortage. Businesses want workers and they just can't seem to hire them because unemployment benefits, lazy, whatever excuses they want to come up for. And this is a problem that we've seen 3 times before, that just, at least in the job openings data, that seems to repeat.
But we're going to go through some graphs that you put together that kind of digs into just off the superficial number, which is what we're looking at right here on this chart. And I'm glad, Jeff, that you followed the Fed's pattern by not naming it just red and pink. You've got a vermilion and a salmon colored instead of just beige and white. Okay, so now we move on to the next graph here. Tell us what this Maya colored blue and cobalt blue, what this chart means.
This is the turnover part of it, which is, the labor force is a dynamic place. Some people get laid off every month. Some people quit voluntarily because they hate the job. They want to go someplace else. And then on the other side of that is companies are hiring people, right? Mm-hmm. So we have sort of the net turnover, which is the rate of hiring minus the people who are leaving either voluntarily or involuntarily. And what you find is that when you make a statistical adjustment of 300,000 or so, that net turnover every month pretty much matches the establishment survey's monthly change.
Fascinating. Perfect. So it looks like we can rely on this data. Is that right? And then...
Right, but this is the turnover data. This is not the job openings data. This is the other part of the JOLTS survey.
Exactly. You've brought this up before, is that job openings there's something off, right? And that's where we're going to get to eventually. But let me show a couple of these.
The job openings data seems to be in a world of its own, and there's a couple of different reasons that could be. We'll get to that.
Okay, so here's another one. Now this is the same thing, but we've zoomed in, right? And it looks like it's still on track, right?
Yeah, we're pretty much everything. Again, it's 1 month further behind, so we don't have the JOLTS data for August, which that was the month of the big payroll report miss. And I would imagine that when the JOLTS data for August comes out early next month, you'll see a marked decline in it as well.
So again, we see hiring minus layoffs and discharges, tracking another set of data. Perfect. Over here, we can now correlate the establishment survey to initial jobless claims, right? It seems like it's
totally
all
separate. Yeah, totally separate
reasonable.
data. This is
Okay.
from the Department of Labor. And what the jobless claims data has, yes, jobless claims have been improving, but the rate of improvement has slowed since May. And of course, we keep coming back to May over and over again. And what that suggested that even before we got to the August payroll report earlier this month, last Friday, in fact, we would have expected it to be a big miss because the jobless claims data was suggesting that there was weakness in the labor market.
So we've got several sets of data, several different sources, collection methodologies. Okay, they seem to correlate except for one of them. And as you explained, in your view, the BLS-JO data is simply incapable of addressing its own increasingly obvious, increasing statistical problems. Jeff, this isn't the first time you brought this up. I don't know how long ago it was, a year or two 2 years ago as well. You were questioning why does this one
2019, absolutely
same
exact
us.
thing.
Yeah,
except it's only gotten worse. The reason we call it turned up to 11 is because now with 11 million job openings, we're supposed to believe there are 11 million job openings, or there are 11 million jobs, potential jobs that remain unfilled. But is that actually the case? Maybe the BLS is double counting postings and not able to discern and eliminate duplicates. Maybe that it just is during these periods of reflation or when things get better, companies are just advertising more than once or more than a couple times or more than they used to for a single job post. And that's really, I think, what's going on here is that it's gotten crazy to the point where maybe the BLS data collection procedures isn't able to keep up or keep accurate track of what's really a job opening and what's really maybe one job opening being advertised multiple times. And what the BLS will say is that no, we count for this stuff. We try to keep track. We try to make sure that we're eliminating any double counting, but it doesn't mean they're having a good time or being able to do it. I think that's really what becomes evident in these periods where it's not just 2021, there was also 2018, and to a lesser extent 2014. And you can see from the chart, it keeps getting worse every time. And of course, in 2014, there obviously was not a labor shortage. In 2018, while the labor shortage made all of the mainstream media, there wasn't a labor shortage then either. So we're left to conclude, at least in those two instances, job openings was, like the unemployment rate, a misleading statistic. Is it likely that it's also misleading in 2021 as well as become nuclear in how it's misleading in 2021? That certainly seems to be the determination of not just the data that we pointed out here, but a hell of a lot of other data, as well as when you look at things like the bond market and bond yields and things like that, which are saying we're not seeing that kind of robust demand for labor, nor is the labor force. Again, the labor force participation rate is a big problem, which suggests maybe companies are advertising for jobs, but they sure as hell are not willing to pay what the labor force wants in order to fill those jobs. And even the hire statistics and the turnover data suggest that companies are not really moving as robustly as they should if this the job openings data was actually representative of the overriding condition in the labor market and the economy.
2014 was the first year of the third Eurodollar event, the global dollar credit squeeze. 2018 was the first year of the fourth Eurodollar event. And here we are again talking about a labor shortage, similar sets. 2021? Might we be in the beginning stages? We'll see. That's why we're taking a look at multiple perspectives, independent perspectives, hopefully. That's what we are going to do in part 3 of this episode. We're going to go back in time and look at a moment when the third Eurodollar squeeze began and see if there's anything similar taking place right now. All right, Jeff, I'll see you there.